Morning, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 4 live stream for the BMW Championship. Gonna break down the prop and showdown side of things to make sure you're ready for all of your exposure out there tomorrow. So if you have any questions, just let me know down in the live chat. But we'll touch on the weather, some of my top DFS plays, some prop targets towards the end, as we usually do. But hopefully you're having a fantastic Saturday. Got a little ginger ale over here, so just having ourselves a little bit of a cool evening. But hopefully you're having a fantastic time yourself and are ready to get after it for tomorrow. I saw a few listeners, a few people in the community went out there and took down a few contests today. So hopefully you guys had some luck for your round 3 results yourself and are ready to get after it out there for Sunday. So I can see we already got a comment down there from Phil. Says, yo, what's up, Luke? You see the D tree climb from the abyss? I did, and there were actually a few people that had rounds like that. So your boy Homa also got those 5 birdies. Yeah, and he actually had the best off the tee day that he's had in like 2-3 months. So we'll talk about Homa later. I don't want to spoil too much, but hopefully you're having a fantastic evening and are ready to talk about all this stuff. But before we get into all the nitty-gritty, look at the weather, talk about the golf course from today, let's first off mention our presenting sponsor of the live stream, which of course are our friends over there at the Ship It Nation, which are your source for all your needs with DFS. Which, speaking of, about 2 minutes ago, we had an MMA slate lock, and that's exactly where I got my projections from. I went over there, took the projections from the Ship It site, also had a little bit of a peek at the stone that they have up there for MMA, and then went over to my optimizer and got building on lineups. I don't spend that much time with my process. A few weeks ago, just about 20-30 minutes of lineup building time, went out there and took me a 12 grand takedown. So obviously would love to run that back out there for tonight. And on the live stream last week, right, mentioned that out there on the stream. So maybe if I talk about it again, we'll go out there, have that same kind of luck. The guys over there at the Ship It Nation are great. They're what I use for some of my other sports, like MMA, where I'm not such an expert on it, right? I'm more of a casual fan. And if, like yourself, you find yourself as more of a casual fan of the sport, well, they've got you covered with all of that analysis. So check them out if you haven't already. Code Luke10 will give you a discount off any membership. And yeah, hopefully we can get a little sweat going with our MMA lineups. We'll probably miss the first fight or two because we're on live stream here, but those are the fights that aren't that exciting anyway. So hopefully when we get off here, we're in a decent position heading forward and can take a few things down. And let's start it off with a look at the golf course. So golf course today played quote unquote easier out there in the afternoon, but I would attribute the difference in scoring average much more to the talent level of players out there in the first half versus the second half of tee times, especially because it was a limited sample size with 48 players. So you can see, right, it looks like it played nearly an entire stroke easier, but in reality, conditions were actually maybe even a little bit harder in the afternoon, but the higher winds and also the firmer greens. So you heard the commentators talking about that, how the golf course was playing much faster out there in the afternoon. And out there into Sunday, I think you're going to see that trend continue. The morning tomorrow is probably going to play at least like a stroke over par with all the slappies that are, going out there and ejecting out there on a Sunday. They don't have much to play for. They're all going to be very aggressive. So I think you're going to see some really ugly scores out there in the first hour or two of tee times, whereas the second half of a whole lot to play for. Some of them playing for their Fedex Cup life, some of them trying to win a tour event for the first time in who knows how long at some points. And I'm talking about you, Adam Scott, right? Keegan Bradley, players like that haven't been there for quite some time. Those kind of players are going to score a lot better tomorrow. So I think you're going to see this same kind of differential, not to spoil the weather too much, but it's not like the conditions later are necessarily going to be easier. So if we go ahead, sort this by ceiling score today, you'll see what I'm talking about. So sure, your Xander teed off a little bit later. I mean, even guys like a Wyndham out there. Let's see who else. I guess Keegan, a Rory, I guess Tommy Fleetwood also had a little bit of a later tee time, but you had your Max Grazeman shoot a -6, and that was a bogey-free -6 round. You had guys like Billy Ho that started at 1 over par. You had a few guys out here like a Cam Young, even a Denny McCarthy, right, who we talked up on the live stream last night, were all guys that went out there and scored with an earlier tee time, though. So even though you had this differential, right, the reason why I want to point this out is that you still had some early starters that went off and played well. Those receptive greens, the more pristine greens without all the blemishes on them, can make a difference. And when you're playing out there, is a little bit more, freedom, right? You're not playing with as much tension out there towards the lead. You can also go out there and have a round like you had there with Max Grazerman. So I think that that's something to point out, especially when we have to consider placement points for tomorrow, and people are going to be tempted just to jam in the top end of the board, especially when I tell you, right, that it looks like pretty flat weather here in a second. You're going to be like, oh, but I want to take all of those placement points. The reason why I show you this is, the Grazerman for tomorrow, that random guy that's starting early that shoots like -5, -6, you're going to have to take down those large field GPPs. Somebody like a Sepp Straka would have been real nice to have, right? Of course, somebody that I used out there for today's showdown. A Denny would have been real nice to have in lineups. You get the idea, right? A lot of these earlier guys that were much lower owned were keys to go out there and take down those big contests. So I think that's still going to be a factor. Even with those placement points in play, you're going to get a few early guys that crack the slate, and you're probably going to have them out there in your lineups. Speaking of the weather, though, let's go over here to the Sunday forecast, where you can see, just like it was today, you can see some winds out there in the morning, close to like 9 to maybe 10 miles an hour of sustained wind. And then it drops for maybe 3-4 hours towards the middle. And then at the very end of the day, the wind gusts go back up. Also, your sustained winds go up there a little bit, get into that 15 to 20 mile an hour range, which means it's going to be pretty flat overall, right? So if you're an early starter, you're going to get some wind there early, but maybe it lays down for like the last hour or two of play out there. And then towards the afternoon, if you're a later starter, maybe your first hour or so of play is going to be in relatively calm conditions. But by the time you're finishing your round, it looks like it's going to pick up again. So I would say that maybe the best players would be guys that are teeing off just before it gets calm out there. So maybe like a 9-10 a.m. local tee time would be a pretty solid time to go off, as you're going to be going off when it's starting to calm down out there with the slightly calmer conditions. And then maybe it starts to pick up just a little bit towards the end of your action, or maybe like 10, 11, right? So like if you could be in this like 8 to maybe 10 range out there into tea time, there's a world, if this exact forecast ends up being accurate, where that could end up being like a micro edge, right? Something like 0.1, 0.2 shots that you're getting there. But I think you're trying to do too much if you're playing a complete weather edge tomorrow. So as I was just saying, I think it's relatively flat out there for tomorrow's action, which means it's going to be a much more traditional slate where you still got to take some game theory into consideration, right? You still got to try and find a few diamonds of the rough that go off and shoot something like -3, -4 in the morning wave. But because placement points are a thing and you can't ignore them, even in the large field GPP, you're still going to have to take some guys towards the top of the leaderboard, ideally probably the winner, at least maybe 1-2 other guys that are finishing in the top 5 to 7 to go out there and take down your largest field contest. So I think it's going to be a good mix of maybe taking a few shots on some mid to early starters and then trying to find pieces of chalk that you make conviction plays. So unfortunately, it's not one where it's a real clear weather situation where maybe the early starters and jamming them in is a good idea. Because the weather is a little bit more flat this time, there's going to be some importance on mixing in guys towards the top end of the board. So personally, I'm going to have at least 3 of those guys. That is 3 guys in the top 10 out there in every single lineup, if not 4 players starting towards the top end of the board. And part of that is because I don't see a big weather difference between the morning and the afternoon. And also because I know that there are spots that I can mix in at lower ownership with either 3-4 spots in my lineup, 2-3 spots out there in my lineup to go out there and get that differentiation. So that's how I'm handling it. A lot of 3-3s, a lot of 4-2s out there with my builds for tomorrow. And not very atypical, right, for what we see on a Sunday Showdown slate. That is usually how I approach things, unless we get some super wacky weather situation, or maybe the top end of the board is going to be the guys that you have to play from the weather situation, or the exact opposite, right, where they're getting the real short end of the stick. If that's the case, sometimes I'll adapt a little bit, right? Sometimes I'll go like 4 guys going off early, really take that differentiation approach if those guys are going to get a weather advantage. And then sometimes, right, you have to be a little bit more chalky than you'd like if those guys are getting the better end of the stick. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I guess depending on how you're looking at this slate, it's going to be a little bit more flat throughout the day. So that's all for the weather. Wanted to give its due diligence out there for a few minutes, but let's circle back to the DFS side now and talk through some strategy out there for tomorrow, which if there's anything for Sunday Showdown that you should be incorporating, it's lineup construction and it's game theory. Everyone's going to be targeting some placement points. I think we're past the days now where people don't know about that aspect of the scoring. And if anything, people overcount that sometimes in their projections. They'll only play guys that are starting up there in the top 5, top 10. And that's not necessarily the optimal strategy out there in your Sunday Showdown. You're going to have bits and pieces like I just got done saying, but having a few early starters for some leverage is going to be key as well. So we're going to go through a few conviction plays, a few flag plants per se that I'm using at 40, maybe even 50, 60% of my lineups. And then on the flip side, we're also going to talk about the guys that I'm mixing in for some leverage that I'm probably not using as much, probably closer to like 15, 20% on some of my leverage plays. But what I'm doing there is trying to get different, right? Taking calculated gambles on guys that are maybe further down the board, maybe not playing as well over the first 3 days that can hopefully go out there and pull Grazerman, like what you had for today's round, or go out there, pull a Straka, pull a McCarthy, go out there and shoot a low score. And that's how you go out there and take something down. So you're going to have to try and find that. You're going to have to try and find your conviction plays. And I'll give you my reasoning. So we're going to talk about some plays. Doesn't mean you have to play them, right? Always going to give this disclaimer before we hop on into things. But what I hope to show you guys here with this stream is what to look for in players, right? What I'm using to make my conviction plays. And if you agree with any of the things that I'm doing, with any of the players that I point out for that matter, then by all means, right, go out there and implement them yourselves. But more so just trying to spitball ideas, right? Trying to give you guys a little bit of perspective heading into building lineups. So you can go out there and do a better job. So if there's any players you want my take on, don't be shy at all to go ahead, throw those down in live chat, or any specific process race questions. I'll go over all of those for you. Any player pool stuff. I don't love questions of like, oh, are you playing this guy, that sort of thing. If you need to choose between a few guys, right, I'll give you pros and cons for either option. If you need an idea of like, a few decent options out there in a certain range, right, I'll give you maybe a few ideas, but yeah, let's try and keep the questions more so to like questions about a player, maybe a player's form, that sort of thing, as opposed to like, who do I play, right? That sort of thing. So let's catch up on chat though. What's going on, Hamza? Got scared to fade today. Won't doubt again. You wish Norm would have hit some more fairways. Yeah, you and me both. What's going on? Hamza says, is it going to rain overnight? No, it doesn't look like it. What's going on, Kep? Already, Luke, who is boat racing into the top 10. Not sure, Kep. I have a few guys I think that might do it, but you'll have to choose from the list that we go through. Because if I had a crystal ball, I would tell you, man. What's going on, Steven? Good evening, all. Let's ride into round 4. Amen to that. Pendrith, the best player the last 2 days. Yeah, you couldn't argue with it, especially yesterday. Had that super low round. So, yeah, I think he's a decent option. On a pretty unfamiliar course, how do I differentiate between a guy that has it figured out versus Luxact? There's no way to figure that out, right? I think the best way is to look at shots gained metrics to see who's doing it most sustainably. I would say that Adam Scott, I guess you could have seen the round coming from today, right? Him going out there and kind of giving away some strokes because he had gained like 5 strokes putting. Or actually, I think it was like 6 strokes putting over the first 2 rounds. I would say it's tough to do. You can never know for certain out there. But the one thing that we usually count on when trying to determine if someone's getting lucky, right, maybe just going out there playing above their baseline, is to look at how they're hitting the ball. If they've gone out there, it's been approach play off the tee play, then I don't know if I can count on them not doing that again, because that's the most sustainable portion of a player's golf game. Under pressure, sometimes that changes, but in general, that's the most reliable aspect of golf. So I would say that, and then round 4 success, right? Who's done it on Sunday before, particularly on Sunday when they're in contention, are probably the guys that aren't fool's gold. What's going on, Antonio? Hopefully you're having a solid time yourself. Where's the dude that said he went today? He should have came back with info. Yeah, right. I asked him about the greens and whatnot. Hopefully he's around. I'm assuming he might be heading home because they did just finish play like an hour and a half ago. But more importantly, I hope he had fun out there. It looks like an absolute blast on TV. Golf course is the star of the show this week. So yeah, hopefully he enjoyed it out there. let's talk about what I'm doing for this slate. So up top is usually where I make my conviction plays, and these first two players are going to be my flag plants up top. They're by far the highest owned players that I plan on getting to, and in a lot of lineups, I'm going to be going Xander, then Aberg as my second man in. So I guess let's start with Xander. I'll handle them one at a time, but $11,100, he's -7. He's in prime position to potentially even win this golf tournament, and I think even if he doesn't win, but he shoots something like -5, -6, first off, it's going to be a top 3 finish. I feel pretty confident about saying that. And then also, -5, -6 might be one of the better rounds of the day. Now, is that a guarantee? Obviously not. He's got to go out there, have a hell of a performance to go out there and do that sort of thing. But Xander's definitely trending in that direction. He's, the first 2 days was kind of sketchy, was just kind of hanging around, not doing very much. I guess round 2, back 9, right, really went in the wrong direction. But then today, snapped out of it, went out there, shot a 66. And honestly, tomorrow, I'm expecting to see a lot more of the same. Of the guys up top, he's clearly the best player when it comes to the form. Scotty, of course, right, next talent level guy up there, right? It's him and Xander when it comes to talent level lately. But with form, it's clearly Xander Schauffele. And in terms of placement points, he's got a lot more potential for that top 3, top 5 than a lot of the other players up there. So though he's chalk, you get that, right? That's like 35 to 40% ownership. You don't have to get different with your spend up options. If you're going to take on some ownership, if you're going to take on a guy that's like 30 to 40% owned, they better be like a 9, 10K player. They shouldn't be a 7, 8K player. You'll get a few really egregiously chalky players out here on this kind of Sunday Showdown slate. You're going to get that up top for a lot of different slates, especially Sunday Showdown. But if there's a spot to take that kind of ownership, it would be with somebody like Xander Schauffele. That being said, he doesn't have to be the option that you use up here. But if you're going to use somebody, you're expecting -5, -6. So a Scotty Scheffler, a Rory's in play. Heck, even a Colin Morikawa, a Victor Hovland to be more than usable out there on Sunday, but you're pretty much asking everyone to do the same thing, right? It's not like Xander's going to get there by shooting -4 and like finishing in 5th. You need these guys to go out there and shoot -5, -6. And personally, I feel a lot better about Xander going out there and having that sort of round than anyone else in this range. It's not just the talent level. A lot of it has to do with how he's actually playing at this golf course. So part of it's the caddy. Austin Kaiser is known for, first off, he's used to play at elevation out there when he was playing college golf. They said something on the broadcast today about how he has like some specific formula that has worked for years out there at elevation. So I don't know, maybe it's part of that with Xander, right? Partially narrative based, but more than anything, I think he's just playing some really good golf, and I'll take him at that kind of ownership. Olivia Gobert, $9,600. He's -10 out there. He's 36.4%. The sort of player that, I'm expecting to go out there, be aggressive. You heard in his post-round interview today that he played the exact kind of round that he was hoping for, and that's to be aggressive, live with your mistakes, right? He even said he's okay with making bogeys around this golf course as long as he's going out there and filling it up with birdies. And out there on Showdown, just as they said out there with Xander, it's not so much that you can just go out there and lean on placement points. You need guys to go out there and score. And if Aubert's objective is to go out there and be as aggressive as humanly possible, that is the ideal situation or ideal mindset to have to go out there and score a lot of Draftkings fantasy points. So when we're playing Showdown, when we're playing a format that requires us to have the highest fantasy score to win, not always just the best score, right? A lot of times, if he shoots -3 tomorrow but makes 8, 9 birdies, we're going to be thrilled with that kind of performance. And when he's telling us word for word, tells the camera, gets asked about it, it says, yes, that is exactly what I'm trying to do, then I'm going to go out there and use the guy for Sunday Showdown. So we know he's going to be aggressive. He's primed for some placement points as well. So just like a Xander, even though he's going to be one of the highest owned players on the slate, I'd rather take my shots on guys up top like that and give myself a chance for some placement points up there too. Where I don't like to take chalk would be on an Adam Scott, right? He's also going to be like 30% plus owned. He's overpriced now at $9,300. He's also going to be super mega chalky. I'd rather be an Aubert that you could argue is actually even too cheap at $9,600 than somebody that's overpriced and still has that ownership. Another example of a fade would be Alex Noren, right? I'm not going to play him, who's probably too expensive at $8,400 and also like 25% owned. Keegan Bradley, another one that I'm not playing out there tomorrow because being towards the top, or in the case of Keegan, right, being at the top of the leaderboard is not enough to just make you a play. You've still got to go out there and score. And the fact that he's carrying about 36% ownership makes him a fade, right? There's a difference between playing 50, 60% of somebody like a Norn, a Bradley, or an Adam Scott, and then playing 60% Xander, right? 60% Xander, you don't bat an eye, right? Like, okay, sure, yeah, I'll play 60% Xander. Aubert, same thing. I mean, sure, he's maybe a little bit sketchier on Sundays. Track record for Aubert in contention has been a little bit of a train wreck lately, so maybe you don't feel as good about him as you would with the Xander Schauffele, but either way, with these two players as compared to some of the other guys that are more expensive, you can see why I have a lot more confidence getting to them as conviction plays. So you're going to have to pick your spots. I choose to take it on guys that have shown it in the past, that are some of the best players in the field. And into those other spots, right? I know that I don't have him on here, so you can't see that he's down there as a fade. But yeah, I'm not playing Adam Scott. You can see I'm not playing Alex Norn, and same thing out there with Keegan Bradley. Let's see. Any questions? So we got a question from Evan. He says, for an outright, what is the lowest number that I would still consider? So you're thinking -7 is still live. So what is Wyndham Clark? Is Wyndham Clark -7? So yeah, I would say -7 and better, because I think if anyone's going to chase down -12, it's somebody like Wyndham Clark. Maybe it's -6. I mean, if you're -6 like a Pendrith, Cantlay, I believe, is -5, right? Yeah, he's -5 there, $9,500. You'd have to have like a 62 to go out there and win. I mean, you have to think that between Aubert, Adam Scott, Keegan, that somebody is going to shoot like -3, if not like -4, -5 out of those three players. I know it's going to be tough. It's going to be pretty windy towards the end of the day. So maybe not. Maybe it's like at least they go out there, shoot like -2, -3. If they're going to shoot -3, let's put that at like winning score, like 15, 16 under par. If you're -7, I mean, even that's like a 63. So yeah, I think -7 is probably the right answer. Anything worse, so anything like a -5 coming back to win or a -6 would require a lot of help from the top end of the board. Now, today you got that, right? Adam Scott came back to the field. Even guys like Keegan made a bunch of mistakes, or else he would have been like -7, -8 on his round. You got the help out there for round 3. I don't know if you can count on that out there for Sunday. But yeah, to answer your question, -7 in most cases, maybe -5, -6. Steven says, how do I feel about Siwoo, who is currently 33rd in the Fedex Cup? You think you want to look at guys around the 30 mark? Well, yeah, so I guess I'll circle back and I'll answer this now. So I've talked about this the last few days out there for Showdown, but the same thing applies. Players that are still live to make it to Eastlake are almost all the guys that I'm considering. In fact, there's going to be one guy towards the exact bottom of the pricing that I'm using that isn't going to be live out there for Eastlake. Every other player I'm using, and I mean quite literally every other player that I have in my player pool for Sunday Showdown, has at least a realistic chance to make Eastlake. And if they're not like a guy that's on the border of trying to make it, they're guys that are already into Eastlake. And there's a few reasons for that. Obviously, the guys that are already into Eastlake are playing for positioning out there for the next round. But the guys that have a chance at least have some hope to go out there and try. They're going to be engaged from hole number 1. If they start like birdie, you bet your ass that they're going to be out there trying to score the best they can. The guys down here that have literally zero chance. In fact, I'd say the guys from like JT Poston down, like these like 1%ers, or certainly like the guys that are under 0.1% over here. These kind of players, I'm just not interested in using out there for tomorrow. So yeah, I think that there is a motivation factor to include. I don't know if I would like boost the guys that are just outside the top 30, but I think more than anything, it's trying to avoid the players that have nothing to play for. In fact, you can see of the guys that have nothing to play for, Grazerman actually played well today. So I don't know if it's a spot there you have to go out there and like cross off these players. But Graysman, Cam Young, I guess would be the two main examples of guys that still played well. But it's not going to be that many that go out there and have a really good day, right? A majority of these guys, I mean, you see like +3s down here, +1s for like Jaeger. Austin Eckert shot a +2. Like it was pretty bad sledding. It was pretty tough sledding for most of these kind of guys. But yeah, I guess the Graysman is the real big one, the real big outlier there. But I would say you could have seen Grazerman coming because he was heading out by himself. Not so much the Cam Young one, though. Cam Young, He had nothing to play for and he played well. So good for him, at least. You're frankly baffled by this Norn performance. The only thing I could see for seeing this kind of performance, Antonio, would be that Norn has won twice on the DP World Tour when they play in the Swiss Alps. So just the same event, by the way, that Matt Fitzpatrick has won before, that he's played very well at when he hasn't won over there on that side of the pond. Those two players, and Fitz hasn't done shit this week, so obviously narrative doesn't always end up working out. But yeah, other than that, I'm with you on that. It was his form has dropped off quite a bit from where it was early in 2024. But good, I have to say, good for him. He's a longtime journeyman. He's earned it. He's been grinding out FedEx Cup playoffs for how many years at this point? And I think if he finishes top 3, he makes it to East Lake. I don't think he has to win to make it the whole way, but I guess let me double check on that real quick. We'll get a good idea by this percentage. So he's got a 67% chance. So yeah, I think he has to finish T3 or better to go out there and make it. Hopefully he does, because I don't know, to go out like this, right, to be up there in the top 30 with 1 round to go, that'd be a pretty devastating way to go out. All right, let's talk about a few more guys I'm getting to. So let me bring the comment off here and let's keep this thing rolling. So we've talked about a few fades. Now I want to talk about somebody that's a little bit lower owned. And I'll stress the little bit lower owned because it's not like Wyndham Clark at 21.2% is really going to get you any leverage. But I guess comparatively, when we're comparing them to a 36% owned Aubert or a nearly 40% Xander, I guess there's a little bit of leverage when you put it in that kind of light. But what I like about Wyndham is how he is playing. Round 2, he couldn't make a putt. He still went out there and made a bunch of birdies. Today was the exact same thing. He gained in all 3 tee to green categories, but lost strokes with the putter, which is just bizarre world out there for Wyndham Clark, right? Normally, tee to green can be a little bit sketchy, a little bit inconsistent from day to day. The putter's normally what he's bread and butter, right? Relies on it round to round, goes out there, just gains a bunch of strokes to the field. Rounds 2 and 3 has not had the magic wand. What I like about Wyndham is that he's giving us the kind of tee to green stats that we need out there on Sunday. Just needs to go out there and get that magic flat stick. So I'm going to go back to him. He's a guy that I always use in Showdown because of his immense birdie or better upside. And at -7, I have an outright ticket on him. I'm definitely not counting on him to win this thing, but it would be quite something for the hometown kid to go out there, finally get that putter to work. I mean, if he hits the ball like he has the last 2 days, goes out there and gains 3 strokes putting, that's a -8 round right there. And in fact, I've done this a few times on Sundays where I have one of these like real gut feelings about a player. I've got a sneaking suspicion. And the last time I said this, guy went out there and won, by the way. It was a guy named Scotty Scheffler, by the way. Went out there and won the Olympics the last time I made this kind of call. But Wyndham Clark is at least going to sniff the lead out there tomorrow. That would be my bold hot take out there for tomorrow's round, is that I think Wyndham Clark is at least going to make a run at it. And if he's going to, I mean, look where he's starting, right? -7. I know we had somebody ask about that -7 score before. First off, lucky number 7. Maybe there's something to that. But if he gets anywhere close to that lead, it means he makes a shit ton of birdies. That means he's probably making at least 6-7 birdies on the round, which is what we're looking for in Showdown. So I think in Showdown's probably the best way to take advantage of it. Again, the outright to actually go out there and win would probably be too far-fetched starting at that kind of score. But if he gets into the mix, you're going to want to have him out there in fantasy, and that's why I'm playing him, right? I think he's got a decent shot to go out there and do so. He's hitting the ball well enough to go out there and shoot something low. So why not go out there and try and take one of the streakiest putters that we have out there in the PGA Tour? We'll move past this range, but you can see I'm avoiding some of the chalk and guys like an Alex Norton, Keegan Bradley. So I guess it'd be worth pointing out guys I'm actually playing in this range. So Sungjae Im, potentially usable for some upside. He didn't have the best round 3, but maybe he can turn it around out there for round 4. I'm also potentially looking at guys like a Nick Dunlop. Reason why I like Dunlop, by the way, is it's not like he's had a flashy week, but now he is $7,700. It's not like he's up there in the top 5 to start. So it's not like a lot of people are going to have their eyes drawn to him, right? Especially because he's a lot more expensive than what he was for main slate. But the kid still nearly won last week. He's coming in with some of the best form in the field, right? He just won like a month ago out there on the PGA Tour. And he plays well at these style of golf courses. I don't know what it is. It's at tough courses. I thought he was really going to struggle out there his first season on tour. He's actually excelled at some of the harder tracks that he's played. So I like the Ben Poa numbers. I like the way that he's played so far this week, right? -5, pretty impressive over the first 3 rounds. And the ownership, I know we don't have them on here. Like I said, I just wanted to point out maybe a few options that were in this range. The ownership's not crazy out there on Nick Dunlop. So definitely an option you can use for some leverage there. Where are we at? Sahith was a showdown anchor. Got it, run it back tomorrow. You make your own decisions out there, Edward. You seemingly got burned by him yesterday and want to blame somebody for it. So, yeah, I'm going to let you do your own thing then, man. Antonio says, classic Rory. Non-competitive rounds 1 and 2 will backdoor top 5. I could see that, Antonio. I have to say that would fit the script out there from what we've seen. But he's all over the place. He actually hasn't played horribly this week. You can see, actually, in terms of like their top-end scores, he's like the second towards the top, right? So he's playing better than Morikawa, a lot better than Scotty. He's playing better than Victor Hovland too. So yeah, kind of just like plugging along. He's never going to have a chance to win, right? Of course, starting at -5. But if he goes out there and he has like a -5 round, boom, right? He's up there in that top 5. So yeah, dude, that would be really on brand. That's for sure. What's going on, Antonio? You truly hate laying minus odds out there for a placement bet, but X being -115 to finish top 5 is disrespectful. Oh, I agree on that one, because I don't see him moving down the leaderboard. I mean, something like 3-4 under par is pretty much what I'm expecting from Xander. Now, not that that is going to happen 100%, but based on how he's playing, based on how he's looked on Sundays lately, I mean, you'd have a hard time thinking he's not going to go out there and at least put a decent performance together. I'm not saying great, but he's probably at least going to have a pretty good day out there. Yeah, -115 top 5. I mean, -115, by the way, is like pretty much them giving you even money out there on the sports book. I don't know if I'd be that much against that. I think that's a decent bet. Let's keep this going. So in terms of guys here in the 7K range, I wanted to point out Justin Thomas is still playing for his FedEx Cup life. Now, a lot of this comes down to other players, but even with that, JT, if he has a low round, can pretty much guarantee himself into the top 30. So I would expect to see him battle a little bit. You could say the same thing about Jason Day. He's also on that precipice of going out there and making it to East Lake. So these sort of players that, you know, going off super early, a lot of them I have a hesitation to play because of the whole motivation factor. The ones that I'm choosing to take a shot on, just like we had for yesterday, and it's a lot of the same players because that situation has not changed a whole lot from round to round. I'm taking the shot on the guys that I know are going to give a damn tomorrow, because the worst thing to have happen would be to have somebody go out there, just par hole number 1, right? Maybe they hit it greenside, they can't get it up and down, and then they go, you know what? All right, today's not my day. Go out there rest of the round and are like +2, their last 17 holes. I want the guy that's going to go out there like a JT. He goes out there, he doesn't birdie number 1. He goes, damn, I'm number 30 on the FedEx Cup rankings. Like, I have shit to play for these next 17 holes, and that aren't just going to go out there and completely bitch quit. So I think Jason Day, right, Justin Thomas, who we're pointing out here is the play right now. These sort of players, and you can see I only have them at like 3.4%. They're essentially going to be unowned because of their positioning on the leaderboard. And if they happen to go out there and get a little something cooking, they're the kind of player that is going to stay on top of that. So there are not that many that I'm playing, right? These sort of players are like 7 to 15%ers out there in my player pool. So it's not even like when I'm getting exposure there, like I'm going too far over the field. But yeah, I like myself a little bit of JT. Next up, we got Brian Harman. You can see Brian Harman at about 11% ownership. So it's not like he's being completely under-owned, but compared to some of the mega chalk in this range, it's a good ownership number. It's reasonable. He's a little bit higher owned than the average for sure, but he also has placement point potential there. At -4, if he shoots something like -4, -5, he's not likely the top 5, but this top 10 placement points are well within reach. Maybe not for short old Brian Harman. You might have to, get on a step stool or something like that to go out there and reach the top 10. But with his shots gained approach and his shots gained off the tee so far, I think that he's got the sustainable kind of shots gained skill set that I'm looking for in a player down low. So $6,900, we can make the jokes all we want about his height and whatnot, but playing some pretty solid golf at a golf course that I didn't really think would fit his game. Tom Hoagie, by the way, if you're looking for shots gained approach, he is the #1 player in the field when it comes to shots gained approach per round. unfortunately just can't buy a putt for his life this week. So out there in round 4, he starts at -5, by the way. So is carrying a little bit of ownership there at 14.6%. But just like a Brian Harman, it's not anything outrageous at that sort of number. He's playing solid golf and has that placement point potential. He shoots something like -4, -5. He's going to get into that top 10, maybe close to that like top 7, top 5, which is what I'm looking for in some of these 6K range players. So, and both, by the way, are very live to go out there to make it to Eastlake. I believe Ryan Harman had like a 67% chance. I believe Tom Hoagie's around like an 80% chance to go out there and make it to Eastlake. So both know that they've got to play solid golf to go out there and make the top 30. So expect them to, again, stay on top of that, right? To not go out there and bitch quit, even if they have a little bit of a sluggish start. And then the last player I'll point out here is the only guy, and I truly mean this, out of my entire player pool for tomorrow, he is the only player I'm using that is not safe, or not, at least not in consideration, to go out there and go to Eastlake, and it is Max Homa. And there's a reason why with Max Homa here. He had his first round, and I shit you not on this, guys, his first round in 2 months where he gained strokes off the tee. And what he's done all week is he's been unbelievable with the irons. In fact, all 4 rounds, he is top 5 in the field when it comes to shots gained approach. So he's +6, right? He's a top 5 iron player. Maybe he found something off the tee today, because I was tracking his entire front 9 and he hit every single fairway. And in fact, I think it was told like hole 12 when he went out there and missed his first fairway. And then you saw the bogeys come in bunches. So he definitely fell apart a little bit. He's definitely a low floor player. But if there's anyone out there that is out of it and is still going to at least kind of care tomorrow, it's Max Homa. He's broken. He's heard the chatter from people. I mean, he's even talked about it in some of the small interviews that he's had. He wants to go out there and figure out what the hell is going on with the golf swing. That hope that, and I don't think we had any bits from him from the golf course today, but that hope that he found off the tee is, I'm sure, going to fire him up to go out there and try and play some golf, because that's been the issue the last 2 months. The guy cannot find a fairway for his life. I mean, he's been hitting water balls. He's been hitting a ball OB seemingly like every single round. And today he was not only accurate, but he was getting that normal distance off the tee. If he can do that, he hits the irons like he has for the first 3 rounds. And today, by the way, he lost like 4 strokes putting too. So that certainly didn't help him out there with the score, but he hits the ball and then he goes out there and somehow gains strokes putting. His iron play is good enough, and the off the tee play was good enough today where he could go out for a nuclear round. Now, we haven't said that for a long time about Homa. In fact, it's probably been like 3 months, right? Since we've said that this kind of potential is there for him, but it's enough where I'm just going to use him. I would say it's a low floor play. He could certainly just not care because he has no chance to make it to Eastlake. But I have, at least personally, I think that there's enough there to say that he maybe cares a little bit more than most. So you don't have to agree with that. You can avoid him all you want. I get it. He's a 6K player. He's somebody who has nothing to do with his own destiny this week. It's more so that, just looking at the shots gained metrics, right? Trying to find a reason to get behind the guy. And he found something with the off the tee play today. So he's only 7.4%, which, by the way, is actually higher than some of the other guys down here. I've got guys like Jaeger, Pavon at like sub 4%. So there are some real leverage options down here in the 6K range. The ones that are getting a little bit more steam would be guys like a Sepp Straka. I've got him at like 15%. Shane Lowry's a little bit over 11, 12% himself. Siwoo Kim is like 15, 16% owned. He's a 7K range player, though. It's all the usual suspects up there towards the top end of the leaderboard. So that's what we'll say about the guys that I'm getting to, right? Hopefully you get an idea of what I'm looking for in players and the sort of things that I'm using in my process to go out there and select my player pool. There were things I was looking for to avoid guys, right? A lot of the guys that were overpriced were players that I was avoiding. And then with trying to find my flag plants, it was a lot of ball striking stats, right? It was a lot of trying to find guys that I think can move up that leaderboard, and hopefully it gives you an idea of some of that process that I implement. So I'm going to get a sip of this. Let's catch up on chat and figure out what we're doing. Wow, fight canceled on UFC. Let me see what fight it is, because that could be great. It could be horrible. That's for sure. Ramaska versus Fletcher. Interesting. I think I had a little bit of that fight, but I don't think that one's the end of the world for me. What's going on, Steven? What do we do about Fleetwood? We figured out the flat stick today, but ball striking was worse. So I would say that that's a good sign that he found the flat stick. I actually thought about making him a highlighted play. I'm using him out there for tomorrow. So I guess just to make it full transparency right there. But he found something with the putter. And the last like 3-4 events, he's been bleeding strokes on the greens like every single day. So the fact that he found something, I think is great. The ball striking falling off for a single round, I don't think is the end of the world, but rather I do think that that is a lot of optimism going forward. And if he can continue that, get back to the ball striking, it's a very decent spot to be in. What FedEx Cup projection number is my cutoff for guys I'm playing? There's not a FedEx Cup number that I'm cutting off. It's based on chance to go out there and make it to East Lake, which I'm pulling off of the Data Golf site. So I'll show you that. It's not a FedEx Cup number. I'm looking at this category to the right, which gives you their chance to make it to East Lake. The green check means they're already in, which is a guy that I would totally be fine playing. But this percentage chance is the one that's a little bit more interesting. If they have over, let's say, like a 5 to 7% chance to make it, I think that they're pretty live. And I'm not crossing anyone off, right? Because obviously I'm still playing Max Homa, and Max Homa has a 0% chance of making it to East Lake. You can see over here, literally 0.0% chance. But yeah, I'm still using them. So hopefully it gives you an idea there. I think it's useful. I don't think you have to live by it, though, if that makes sense. Keegan is minus 125 to have more than 3.5 birdies. You're thinking about betting that right now. 3.5 birdies, that'll probably be lower than the field average, I would say. He's playing solid golf. Yeah, I don't know if you could bet the under on that. That's for sure. The over would be the lean. I don't know if I'd get there myself just because of that Sunday pressure, but he would definitely project over that. That's for sure. Hamza says, how long until I can talk about Prize Picks and Underdog? Would we finish the stuff on Draftkings? So, and you say, how long will that be? Probably like 10, 15 minutes. What's going on? Antonio said, thoughts on Kirk? He is number 32 in the FedEx Cup right now. So I'll base that off of his percentage chance to move on. So Chris Kirk is at a 22% chance, which is totally fine if you're using that as your narrative. In general, I think that Chris Kirk is a pretty average play, all things considered. You know, he's at the portion of the leaderboard where you could get some placement points. So I think he has the upside for that. Ownership, by the way, is around like 10, 11%. So he's getting some steam, but it's not like he's mega chalk down there towards the bottom end of the board. So there are guys personally that I think are just a little bit better plays in that range. But he was one of the guys I was trying to decide between. We're trying to find guys down low. He had the motivation. He's at least in position to get some placement points. It's just down to whether you think he's a better or worse play than some of the other guys that are cheap and also like -3, -4. So personally, not my favorite play, but he was at least in consideration. That's for damn sure. All right, let's go over here to DraftKings and build a lineup or two together. So now I'm just going to try and give you guys some insight into what I'm thinking about when building lineups, which for Sunday Showdown, a little bit different than what we had for days 1 and 2. So days 1 and 2, it was more so about just making sure we're not going to duplicate ourselves. Also making sure that we go out there and get some differentiation to move up leaderboards. Sunday Showdown, it's the same, right? Got to incorporate those two aspects, but we also have to try and find some placement points. So what I usually like to do out there in these lineups is try and find my flag plants. So I'm going to go ahead, just throw Xander into this lineup. I'm also going to throw Obear into this lineup because like I said before, a lot of my lineups are going to start with this combination. They still got to shoot low. It's not like I'm just counting on them getting those placement points. These guys have got to go out there, probably at least shoot -3, -4 to go out there and pay off. But if I'm going to start a lineup with these two players, I'm getting those placement points that I'm looking for. And I kind of know where I got to get different, right? We've got 4 spots. I need at least 3 players to get that differentiation, if not all 4 out there with my last 4 spots. So we're going to go down to the bottom of the board now after taking our 2 flag plants. And now we're going to handle the differentiation and also some of the salary savings that we're going to have to find here. So I'm going to throw in a Max Homa here. So he's going to give us a lot of salary flexibility. He's also going to give us a sub 10% owned player. I'm also going to go up a little bit further and throw in a Tom Hoagie. Now, Tom Hoagie's cheap, but he isn't going to get us that different because he is like 15% owned. So for our last 2 spots, I want to take guys here that are probably sub 10%ers. And the reason why I say that is we have got a 33%er, a 33%er out there with Obear as well, maybe even 40% out there in Xander Schauffele. And then Tom Hoagie's 15%. those three players right there are a big chunk of product ownership when you consider those three. And because you're not going to get like any 1%ers out there on a 48 player slate, you're going to have to really try and stretch to find some differentiation. So what we're going to do here with our last two spots is we're going to take guys that you like truly consider pivots. So I'm going to throw in a Tony Finau here, who I've got at sub 15%. And then for our last man in, rather than spending all of our salary, I'm going to leave $200 on the table and we're going to throw in an Aaron Rye. So by leaving $200, I think that's going to help us out a little bit with trying to make sure that we don't duplicate ourselves. And more importantly, it's going to let us go from an $8,000 price tag in Taylor Pendrith, who's going to be well over 10% ownership, and let us take an Aaron Rye, who I think projects the same, if not better, than Pendrith, given his insane form over the last 2 months, and also a player that is playing for his FedEx Cup life. He's a guy that's right on the border. I think he's got like an 80-90% chance to go out there and make East Lake. So he's going out there and making next week as long as he doesn't do anything stupid. So we know that Aaron Rye is going to stay engaged. We know that he has a lot of incentive to go out there and play well. So this kind of lineup, we've got leverage option there, definitely a leverage option in Max Homa. I would say that guys like Hoagie, Tony Finau, I should say here, aren't leverage plays, but they're about average ownership. And then two chalky guys, right? So as long as your lineup is like a 2-2-2, where it's like two chalk, two average, two low-owned guys, you're probably going to get away with it out there in the large field GPP. Now, just to make sure, right, we went out there and left that $200 on the table, but this is how it's done out there in a large field GPP. You've got some placement point potential, I'd say, with at least 3 spots, if not like 4, if one of these guys goes really crazy out there. Then you've also got spots where you're going out there just hoping that they go low. You're trying to get that placement point potential. You're trying to mix in a few of those nuclear low rounds, and that's how your showdown lineup should look. It shouldn't just be all guys starting in the top 10. It shouldn't all be just guys that are starting from behind. When you're looking at your starting position over here, just make sure that it's a good mix of the best of both worlds, as some people would say. So let's go out there, build another one. You don't have to be as chalky towards the top end of the board, but that is how I'm building a lot of my lineups. If you were to be a little bit chalkier towards like the middle, and let's say you like really liked the Pendriths of the world, maybe you really like a Siwoo Kim down here. So let's just throw those two into a lineup. If you're going to choose to take guys that are like 15-20% down there, and I guess just for the sake of this, I'm going to throw in an Alex Noren too, starting in third, also like an $8,400 piece of chalk. I'm going to be a little bit more hesitant to pair them with like a Xander Schauffele or somebody like a Ludwig Gobert. Rather than that, maybe this is where you go slightly lower owned, right? Where you go a Victor Hovland, who's going to be like sub 15%. A Patrick Cantlay, he's going to be like 15% owned. Or even like a Wyndham Clark right down here at $9,200, who's not going to be like 35 to 40% owned, but rather going to be about 20%. So it's just all about, giving and taking, right? Having the ability to adapt based on the kind of ownership that you already have in your lineup. So you could throw him in. I guess you could throw in like a Tommy Fleetwood here. And obviously this would be a very balanced sort of build. But what I'm more so trying to point out is if you're going to take some chalk towards the middle, you're not going to be able to take all that chalk towards the top. And in fact, if you went with that Pendrith start, you went with another guy down there in the 7K range that's like 15 to 20%, it makes it almost impossible to mix them in with like a Xander or that sort of player up top. So that's why I try to avoid a lot of those options out there in my kind of exposure, and why I would rather just splurge on my guys up top, right? Even like a double spend up going with like Xander and Obear, because you're going to have the flexibility with the last 3-4 spots. If your cheap guys are already pieces of chalk, well, you could see how it'd be tough, right, to also include those guys up top. So that's what I'll say about the lineup construction. Always, right, do what you want to, do what your process is pointing to, do what your gut is pointing to sometimes, if that's something that you're going to rely on. But that's my 2 cents on it and how I see this kind of slate. If you were just here for DFS, that is going to be all that we're doing here. So in here in just like a minute, going to go ahead and cycle over to the prop side of things. Going to take a look at some scoring averages, as you'll see here on the screen. Also going to go through the Underdog and Prize Picks board. So if you guys are here for that, just stay tuned for all of that action. But if you're just here for DFS, that is all I've got for you guys this week. Best of luck with all of your exposure out there for tomorrow. And the only thing I ask is that first off, you go out there, take down a GPP or 2 for me. And also that you smash the like like button before you hop on out of here. But let's see if there's any last second questions. If not, we're going to talk about all sort of prop stuff now. Where we at? So FanDuel was cooking with the props. That is good shit. Thank you for the heads up, by the way. You know I'm always looking for that. What's going on? Antonio says Hoagie should legit try to use the long putter. I think so too. He hasn't been a horrible putter this year, so maybe that's why he hasn't quite gone to that point. But, you know, Glover obviously had a very good time with it. You mentioned Will Zalatoris and Ricky Fowler. You might be on to something. Hey, the offseason is the right time to try it. So hopefully someone that's close to him can try and get him one of those jailbird putters. Maybe try and get him in contact with the head of Odyssey, right? So you can go out there and get a deal going or something, because that'd be pretty sweet for him. Thanks, Luke. Said appreciate you. Appreciate you, Steven. Best of luck tomorrow. And did Bobby Mack's withdrawal affect me? Yeah, of course it did. Yeah, so I played him for main slate. He wasn't a fixture out there in my showdown exposure, so it wasn't hurt there. But yeah, I played him in main slate. But just like with Hideki, I didn't play Hideki in main slate, so I wasn't that worried about that one. But even if I did, it doesn't really rattle me all that much. I've just seen it so much at this point. And just like I said with Hideki, they lose a whole lot more from withdrawing than we do. I do have to say, though, it did look a little bit more suspect when McIntyre withdrew, because I don't know. I don't know if I buy the whole like mid-round back pain. Obviously, Hideki before the round, you can buy him waking up, right, and having that kind of discomfort. Robert McIntyre might have just said, fuck this. I want some pints of beer with my boys home, and went out there and left to go out there and have a good time. But I could be wrong about that too. It might have actually been a back injury, but yeah, it doesn't ruffle me either way. They choose to do what they want. They lose a lot more than we do on it. So why hold it that much against them? But let's talk about some prop stuff now. So golf course played a lot harder. Now, I thought it'd play a little harder. I thought it'd be maybe like a half a stroke to maybe a stroke under par, but it played only about a quarter of a stroke under par when it was all said and done. And one thing to point out here is that though the morning played a lot harder than the afternoon, I don't think that conditions really reflected that. I would say that it played pretty flat across the board, if not actually slightly harder in the afternoon. The reason why the scoring average was so different is because of the way they had tee time set up. I mean, normally, right, your early starters, right, are the guys starting from further behind, but especially at a no-cut event in just a 48-player field, you're going to get that variance. You're going to get a lot of really high scores with some of your early starters, the guys that just don't give a fuck, right, out there in the first 2 hours of tee times. And those outliers heavily impact this average. In a 70-player field after the cut, right, you see that kind of variance anyways. But in a 48-player field, it's that on steroids, right? You get even more of that variance out there. And the reason why I point this out is the morning wave guys, I think are decent fades, but it's not so much that I think they're going to have harder conditions. It's that mental factor that I was talking about before. And just like I mentioned yesterday, I actually ended up using this for some of the props that I took. Are the guys that are out of it down here, I think there's a really good case for taking their over on bogeys, because it's not like they don't care about how they're playing. It's just that they know that bogeys don't matter, right? They can go out there, they can make some mistakes, they can kind of just shake it off, go, oh, well, right? It's not the end of the world. It's not like it was going to help anyways, but they are going to go after pins and try to make some birdies. So I think the way that you would handle these lower tier players is that if you could find a really soft birdie projection, I actually don't think it's the worst idea in human history, is they're going to be playing on some really soft greens, maybe slightly lower winds than what they're getting in the later afternoon. But more importantly, the over on bogeys would also make sense for some of these players. They're going after pins. They're not really going to give a shit about what happens. So you're going to see a few of them make some dumb mistakes. So for props, I think that there's going to be some anti-correlation that we could potentially go with because of this dynamic with the early starters and a lot of these guys having no chance to make it to the next week. So we're going to have to see how many of these players are even posted over there in Underdog or Prize Picks. But I think that you have to treat that this portion of the board, the portion of guys that don't have a good chance to make it to next week, a little bit differently than the rest of the board, which would include any of these guys with a chance to make it to East Lake, or of course, anyone that is already locked in. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at these stat averages, as the mindset and the positioning of a player is that something that I don't think you can ignore out there for tomorrow. Let me bring up Underdog. I don't think they had the full board up before, so let me refresh this and see if they've gotten to that. Looks like we have a more complete board than before, at least more posted than what they had there. Looks like Prize Picks doesn't want to let me look at the board again. So let me see if what worked the last 2 days works for trying to get that up over here, because I would like to look at a comparison between the two sites and try and figure out what we're going to do here. Antonio mentioned that we did have some FanDuel odds, so I'm going to go ahead and bring those up real quick. And then Caesars, the FanDuel's posted. That means that Caesars has their shit up too. So let's go ahead and bring that up as well. Let me refresh this and show you guys what we're looking at. So here's the Caesars board, which we'll circle back to here in a second. And then here is that FanDuel board. I still can't get Prize Picks to work, which is that I have no idea why it won't work. I'm sure at some point they'll fix it, but come on now. It's so annoying. Yeah, whatever. Well, we'll circle back to Prize Picks here in a few minutes when hopefully it'll load for us. But these odds, so they've got 71.5 on Norton, and he is juiced a little bit over. Xander is juiced under 69.5. Okay, good to know. Let's see. Homa 71.5, juiced a little bit over. Henley juiced over at 70.5. He's minus 140 for that. Cantlay is probably juiced a little bit under 70.5. I would agree with that for the most part. Let's keep going through these. So you can see Rory is actually juiced over at 69.5. Wyndham is about even money at that same number, 1.5 under par. Aberg juiced under at 70. Actually, is he juiced over at 70.5? I do not agree with this line. 70.5 for O'Barity is juiced towards the over. So they're really leaning into the whole choking line then. Him not having a very good finishing round. That is interesting. I don't agree with it, but it is at least interesting to point out that the sports books do not think that O'Bear is going to have a good round. It's a little sketchy, and I think that says a lot about how he's been finishing golf tournaments lately. Tommy Fleetwood is at pretty much even money at 70.5, and then Keegan is at 72.5, albeit juiced under, where he's minus 150 towards the under. Wait, now he's even money at 72.5. So yeah, I guess a huge bet probably just came in on Keegan Bradley for the under on strokes because they had a minus 150 and now he's even money. So yeah, that's actually, I guess that means that someone put a bunch of money on the over. Whatever. I have no idea why he's at 72.5. And honestly, I have no idea why somebody just hammered his over at 72.5 because that's already the highest strokes line on their book. I know he's leading. I know that there's some pressure involved and whatnot, but Adam Scott is 71.5 and he's only minus 140 towards the over. So somebody went out there and hammered that Keegan over at plus money. It moved the whole way to even money. So, oh, interesting to see. I don't know if I agree with that though. Let's take a look at some of the Caesars stuff. So not only in Caesars do we have strokes lines, but we can also take a look at some of their birdie props they have posted. So the stroke stuff looks pretty much the same as what we had on FanDuel. I don't see any major differences yet, other than that maybe Rory has slightly more juice towards the over here on Caesars. Let's see what they have Keegan at. So Keegan was at 72.5 and he's closer to even money. So I guess they moved the line to make it closer to what it was over here. And let's take a look at those other categories I was mentioning before. So the birdie pars, let's scroll down to where they have the birdie stuff posted. So Henley, 4.5 and minus 155 under. Same thing with somebody like a Harman. In fact, he's actually minus 180 towards the under. Whereas Victor is at 4.5 and he's minus 145 over. We've got a Rory at 5.5 birdies. We've got a Homa. He's juiced under 4.5. You probably got to agree with that, with how poorly he's been playing. But a Cantlay, minus 135 over. A Wyndham Clark, minus 140 towards the over. It's pretty much what I was expecting to see from a lot of these sports books. Antonio, by the way, it's not showing me the birdie lines over here on FanDuel. If you could let me know what they have Wyndham Clark birdies or better at, I'd be super appreciative. If you could let me know what that would be over there in FanDuel. And then I guess Victor Hovland too. I would kind of like to see that because he's minus 145 over here on Caesars FanDuel. Yeah, I'd like to know what they have him at over there. Let me see if I can get this damn Prize Picks thing to open because that's the only site we need to compare to now before we go out there and enter some exposure. And they have no interest at letting us look at the board for some reason. Come on now. Press and hold to confirm that I'm a human. I mean, I've done that like 5 times. You guys still won't let me go to it. All right. It might be chalked. We might not be able to look at the prize picks board, guys. The stuff I've done the last few days that went out there and fixed it and made it work is not working this time. All right. Well, I guess we'll try on that a little bit later. I guess what we can do is just try and make an underdog slip before we go out there and do that. Speaking of, Antonio has us hooked up with the update on those FanDuel odds. So Victor is minus 150 for the over. Okay. And what was Cantlay and Wyndham Clark? If you can give me those ones too. Prize Picks doesn't even have a board yet. Okay. That answers the question then. So we're not missing anything. So Clark is minus 140 for the over. So here's what I'll say about Wyndham Clark. So I bet is over 4.5 today, and he got me 4 birdies. Reality is, though, he could have easily had like 7, 8 birdies on the round. He was hitting the ball beautifully. He was hitting it close. He actually missed 2 putts off memory that were inside 5 feet for birdie. I'm not expecting that to happen again. So if he's minus 140 towards the over on birdies, I think that sounds like something that I want to play. Same thing with a few of the other guys that I was having you look at. So like Cantlay, I think is maybe even within play as well. I think that the Hovland one with this 1.1x multiplier could be potentially in play. Now, the issue is with these birdie props is that they screw you on the payout if you don't find a way to anti-correlate it. So maybe we can find something to mix in to make the payout better, but it's kind of just spitballing what I was looking for at this point. So yeah, Cantlay is also minus 140. I kind of want to play these, like especially like on an app where we're not taking that juice, right? Like over here in Underdog, if we can find a way to anti-correlate this and get the payout where we want it, these are the kind of props that I want to enter because I think it's going to be pretty tough tomorrow. So it's not like I like these birdie props because I think it's going to play easy. That's not what I'm saying by any means. But if you're going to do anything as a supportive stance on players, with some tough pins, coarse skin and firm, I think there's going to be bogeys out there. But if you're hitting the ball well, you're keeping the ball in the fairway, you're also going to be able to attack with some short clubs into greens. So I think there's birdies to be had. I mean, you saw that with the average was 4.26 today, and that includes a lot of the shittier players that were going off earlier. If you just look at the guys there in the PM wave, the birdie average was closer to 4.5 per round for the guys that were teeing off later. So, birdie average was pretty much 4.5 for these guys because they're all guys that were teeing off later, and they're above average birdie makers. And you can see the kind of sportsbook juice that they have in their direction. So who could be fade? I will say Russell Henley luck boxed the ever living fuck out of it today. Now, I don't know if him at 70.5 would be a better fade or going to like an over at 2.5 bogeys. He was minus 140 towards the over here, but let me see what it would look like for bogeys because we looked at the birdie props. Now let's look at the bogey props. Coincidentally, right, he's at 2.5 bogeys. And he's also minus 140 for that over. So I guess we would just kind of pick our favorite at that point if they're both minus 140. But maybe we can find a better bogey option. So I know that Russell Henley made some sense for a fade, but maybe we can find somebody that has nothing to play for that we can fade. So let's go through this. So Sahith 71.5. I'll probably stay away from that one. Keegan is at 71.5. He has 72.5 on books in even money. So in theory, a 71.5 fade would be some value. Not a ton of guys on here that aren't playing for anything tomorrow. Matty Fitz isn't, so I guess he could potentially be an option for a fade. But I would say that this Keegan one, because he's in contention, might be just a little bit better. And this will get a few others. So the Russell Henley one could still be in play, especially that 2.5 bogey play. What was Keegan's bogeys at? Sorry, he didn't have a bogey line. Maybe if we refresh it, we'll get that for Keegan Bradley, but who knows? Maybe he just doesn't have one posted. Where's he at? Yeah, still nothing posted for Keegan. Okay, that's a little bit strange. There's Max Homa. We're still going through that range. I guess Russell Henley fade could be an option that we get to. Not a ton of fade options, I would say. So they don't have a lot of those scrubs that have nothing to play for even on the board. But based on what I'm looking at here, by the way, if we played this 5-man, it would actually pay a little bit more than what it's supposed to. I don't know if it'd be my favorite thing to do to go and enter this as a 5-man, but I do have to say that these props are 5 leans that I'll probably end up getting to out there for tomorrow. By the way, I'll tell you the reasoning. Keegan, by the way, it's a 1-stroke discrepancy. Also, he's the leader, so playing with a lot of pressure. He shoots even par. He would go over this sort of line. So I am interested to see where PrizePicks ends up posting the board so we can look at that for comparison. But I'm guessing they're going to post them at 72 strokes. So that might be a 0.5 discrepancy. Might not be, right? We'll have to see what they end up going with. Russell Henley, I'm guessing he'll probably be at 71 strokes over there on PrizePicks. They could surprise us. They could also post them at 70.5, but that's why those were the first few leans that I was looking at. I would expect to see these guys posted at 4.5 on PrizePicks. Now, Clark, probably the same thing, or it'll be 4.5 on both sites, but Cantlay and Hovland, they're probably just going to post them at 4.5 birdies, right? So over here on Underdog, where you can kind of boost up the payout by taking them with the Scorcher, maybe it's not the worst idea to take them on that side as opposed to PrizePicks later on. So let's see where we're at on questions. Fade Matt for 1.1x. What was he at? So which category, by the way? Let's see if I can figure it out. So he was 1.1x for, I guess you're saying the bogey line, right? Out there with that. If he was 2.5, I would 100% be with you. In fact, if he was 2.5, and even if he was like a 0.9x multiplier, I would think about fading him too. And I think you're on the right kind of idea because he's not playing for his East Lake life. Like he's done, right? He has a 0% chance to go out there and make next week. Like maybe even the 71.5 strokes line. Now, I'm not sure if he has one for comparison. I'm over there in FanDuel. In fact, let me look at it. Let's see. Fitzpatrick, does he even have anything? So yeah, nothing posted over there. I'm assuming he doesn't have something posted over here either on Caesars, but you never know. Maybe I could be wrong. Let's see. Matt Fitzpatrick. Yeah, nothing posted in terms of a strokes line. It's in consideration at very least. I don't know if it's my favorite play, but it's definitely something I'm going to consider entering. That's for sure. Aberg's over 4.5 is under -125. That's what I was saying before, Antonio. They actually have that one posted on Caesars. I think that he's got a good chance to go over 4.5 birdies. He said that he's going to be aggressive, right? He was mentioning that he's okay making some bogeys as long as he's going out there and trying to score. I actually think that his over is a pretty good look. Keegan Fantasy, he said it seems way too low. Those fantasy score props, they're usually a little bit hit or miss. If you compare him to the other guys at 71.5, he is lower than some of the other ones, right? So he's 19 compared to 23.5 out there with like an Adam Scott, Sahith Theegala. Now, the issue is, right, I don't think Keegan has a good day, right? He's starting in the lead. He's going to be playing with a lot of pressure. But in terms of like the comparative value, it is probably there. The issue for me is the fact that he still has to go out there and actually hit that line. So I think if anything, I think the over on strokes might be the better way to go about it. But, you know, if you're a Keegan believer, it could be a look. Henley's a bullshitter, you said. Yeah, I agree with that one. That's for damn sure. I don't know if you saw his round today, Emmett, but he luck sacked the ever-living shit out of it today. He made like a 30-foot par putt on 16 that broke 3 ways. He chipped in for a par, and it's just, and you can tell, right? I was obviously sweating a fade for him, and it didn't hit. Yeah, he is a bullshitter. You're right. Yeah, Keegan Fantasy very low, as you said. I do think it's low, but at the same time, I don't know if we're going to count on him to have a good round, right? Starting in that leader spot. You'd be careful on late guy birdie or better overs. Pins are very hard. Well, we can look at the pins, but I don't know if that's true until we look at them, right? So let me bring them up and we'll look at it. Pins are usually tough for Sundays, but we have to take a look at the scoreable holes to go out there and determine that. And in fact, dude, they haven't posted a pin sheet yet, Sean. So I don't know if you have a crystal ball or if you're like a player or a caddy or something and like you were sent the information early, but yeah, they haven't posted pins. So you're probably just a bullshitter if I had to guess. Yeah, we'll look at Big Six. You think the strokes lines on FanDuel and Caesars for late guys are awful? Yeah, I don't know about that. You said look on the shot tracker for round 4. It's on round 3, is it not? Maybe they did load in round 4. You never know, I guess. But that would be like a first, by the way. They usually never do that. Yeah, you can't even look at round 4, dude. Yeah, dude. You're looking at the round from today. You can look at the pins early. No, you can't. I'm showing you right now, right? Look in the bottom left. Rounds 1, round 2, and round 3. There's no round 4. And if we go back and we click on these, you're gonna see the same thing. There's no round 4. So yeah, dude. I don't know about that one. You can prove us wrong, I guess, but I don't see it. And if you're talking about the one in the sports book, if they don't post the information publicly, how do they have it, right? I don't know about that one, man. If they post them and they're difficult, then we can adjust to that. I'm expecting them to be normal Sunday pins. There'll be a few tough ones. There'll probably be a few easy ones, but it's not even public information yet. So I don't know how we're supposed to account for that, right? Let's take a look at the pick 6 board though. So over here on pick 6, they've been just pretty much copy and pasting the Draftkings board. But for this week, since they don't have Draftkings odds, they haven't been able to do that. So they've got guys like Adam Scott at 70.5. I actually really like that for an over. They have Keegan Bradley at 70.5. I also really like that for an over too. Let's look at the birdie board. So they have guys like a Rory who, is kind of out of it at this point. So maybe you'd avoid him. Actually, he's still -5. So I can still kind of care out there for tomorrow's round. But this kind of slip is probably what I would go with. Those fades, by the way, if I think Keegan's a decent over at 71.5 strokes, at 70.5, he's an even better play. Adam Scott, right? He's an entire stroke higher over there in Underdog and sports books. And by the way, Adam Scott is like -140 towards his over at 71.5 strokes. So both of those are really solid pieces of value. And then I guess you have to find someone to offset that. So actually an over wouldn't even work. So maybe we could go to strokes and try and find something for an under that would make sense. But these lines are pretty terrible. So we can go to pars. Yeah, probably not the best category. We go to fantasy points. Maybe that's another way that we could try and attack this. Like maybe an over on fantasy points for like Wyndham Clark or something like that. Maybe like an over in fantasy points for like a Victor Hovland. That's still an issue, I guess. I was thinking like fade versus positive stance play with trying to mix things in. But the way it works over here in pick 6 is you literally need an over and an under in a slip to go out there and make it playable. And that's going to be tough to find based on what we have here. So, maybe you do fade somebody that's kind of out of it. So is there anyone even on the board? I guess like a Sahith here, but that would be an over on strokes, and we're already mixing it with a few other overs. I got to say, I like the board. And by the way, this Sahith over 70.5 is also a really good play that I would mix in. I like these fades for strokes. I do also potentially like this over on Rory or this over on like a Victor Hovland or maybe even like a Cantlay birdies here at 4.5. The issue is going to be to try and find an under to make this work. I mean, fantasy points, I guess maybe you could try and find something here. Pars, you could try and force something in, right? And try and do like an under on pars for somebody. But it's such a tough scene. All the value, in my opinion, would be on overs, whether it's a few of these overs on birdies or, a few of these fades on strokes for scrubs at like 70.5. But it's not my favorite slate because there's nothing to mix in terms of unders. So if you're playing on pick 6 and maybe you do have an underlean that you really like, you're probably going to have a lot of over stuff to go out there and mix in with it. But personally, I don't see a lot right there. Let's see if we can get this prize pick shit to work because that's really annoying. I can't even look at the board. I guess they didn't even have a board posted, so I'm not missing out on all that much, huh? And it doesn't look like there's one posted now. They just ended up updating it and making it so I could look at their website at least, and they've got nothing posted. So, is what it is, I guess. Let's see on chats. Sean is from the future. The Sportsbook tracker is the ShotLink third-party tracker. Okay, so you're saying you do it for every tournament. I'll believe you on that then. I don't use those trackers, so I wouldn't know, right, whether they update them ahead of time. Click on each hole. Which one are you talking about, by the way, Sean? Because I've never used that tracker before. Are you talking about like Bet365 or is that on FanDuel? Because I guess if I don't log in, right, I can't log into FanDuel or DraftKings because it's not legal down here in the state of Florida. Tell me what sportsbook you're using, though, because that is good information to have ahead of time. But sportsbook, you're on FanDuel and they don't have the round 4 tracker. Go to Caesars or FanDuel. So yeah, Antonio is saying that FanDuel doesn't have it loaded up yet. It's not going to load for me on either regardless, though, because I'm in a state where it's not legal to use those sports books. But that is good information to know, at least. Like if I'm out there in Vegas, I'm out, Georgia, something like that, I could potentially look at those sites in their tracker. But yeah, dude, there's Sunday pins. There's going to be some tough ones. There's going to be some good ones. Even if we see the pins and it's like, oh yeah, there's a few tucked near water, it's not really going to change our thought process all that much. Today's pins were pretty hard in a few spots. They were also pretty easy in a few spots as well. So just to show you, like, for example, like 16 pin, that was a pretty tough one over there towards the water. But 15, right, it wasn't there in that back right like it was for round 1. Hole number 10, 12, right? 12 was a pretty tough pin today. 10 was pretty tough with that sort of pin location. There's always going to be hard locations. 2 and 3, by the way, were really tough pins today. So they might make a few of them tough. If I had to guess, they're probably going to make 10 a difficult one over here on the right side, if I had to guess. 15, maybe like a middle right pin location. Let me see. Where else could they make a tough one? 7, maybe over there on that right side. I could see that being the Sunday pin location. Hole number 3, I'm guessing it's going to be tucked over here on the left somewhere near the water. They've done that a few times already, though, so I could see them going right back to that out there with the Sunday pin. 14, probably there in the back left, probably going to leave that short miss in the water into play. We'll have to see. I mean, obviously, I'm just taking a guess at these pins, but yeah, I fully expect them to be hard. They're going to tuck them out there, but they're still going to be birdies. You're still going to see probably at least a 4 birdie average, probably maybe even 4.25 to 4.5 per round. Just like today, right? You had some that were really tucked. You had some real difficult pins out there for today's action. A lot of wind too. I mean, you saw that, right? 10, 15, maybe even 20 miles an hour of wind the entire round, and it didn't affect the players that much. Go to round 4, click on groups, then click on any group, and you can go hole by hole. It doesn't show up for me regardless, though, man. All right, that's all I've got for this live stream, though, guys. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared out there for tomorrow's action, and you're ready to get after it for all of your props and DFS lineups. If you feel a little bit more prepared, go out there, smash the like button if you guys haven't already, and also make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. Next week, we'll have boots on the ground action out there for the Tour Championship. So if you want to know about the renovation to East Lake, want to know how it's going to play differently here in 2024, go ahead, subscribe so you don't miss any of that information, and let's go out there and have ourselves a Sunday. Best of luck, as I said before. Hopefully you go out there and crush everything that you guys enter and can make your boy proud.